Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. My name is Shahirah binti Sabana, and now I'm going to present on my individual video presentation for animal physiology course. Moving on, so in this presentation I will be discussing on the two topics. The first one is the physiology of oxygen and carbon dioxide, and the second one is the difference between insect, fish, amphibian, reptiles, and mammals respiratory system in terms of their gases exchange. So the physiology of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Both of these gases are known as respiratory gases, meaning they are involved in respiration process because we inhale the oxygen and then we exhale the carbon dioxide. So we can explain the physiology of oxygen and carbon dioxide through respiration, which involves gas exchange and gas transport. Proceed to the respiration. Respiration mainly involves taking in oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide. The oxygen gases that are inhaled will enter the lung and alveoli, which is located close to the capillaries. Then, the oxygen will be transferred to the blood, and at the same time, carbon dioxide are transported from the blood into the alveoli. Then, the oxygenated blood will travel to the left side of the heart, where the heart will pump the oxygenated blood to the other cells. And then when the other cells use the oxygen, they will produce an oxygen deficient blood that will be traveled back to the right side of the heart, and then the heart will help pump the oxygen deficient blood back into the lung to pick up oxygen and release carbon dioxide. So I will be explaining on this respiration process that involves gases exchange and gas transport after this using some images, but for now we'll be looking at how both of these gases are carried in our body. So the oxygen primarily carried by hemoglobin. Hemoglobin can be found in the red blood cell, and then it will form an oxyhemoglobin, which gives the bright red color to the oxygenated blood. And then in contrast with the carbon dioxide, it can be carried in three different ways. So 10% of them will bound to the hemoglobin to form a carbaminohemoglobin. So the carbaminohemoglobin is the one that gives the bluish color to the oxygen deficient blood. And then 5% of the carbon dioxide dissolve in the blood plasma because carbon dioxide has a higher solubility than the oxygen. And then majority of the carbon dioxide are converted to the bicarbonate ions, which contributed to the acidity in our blood. That's why we have to release the carbon dioxide, because it tends to be too acidic for us, and it will cause some complications in our health. So to help illustrate you on the respiration process that involves gases exchange, I'll be explaining the respiration process again by the help of these images. So the first one, we will inhale the oxygen into our body, right? So once the oxygen are in, it will enter the lung, and if we zoom in the lungs, it will the oxygen will then enter to the alveolus. Alveolus is the small sac structure here, and then as you can see, it is wrapped with capillaries. Capillaries is where the blood flows in our body. And then if we zoom in here, this is the alveolus, this is the capillary. We have the diffusion zone in the center, where it is the area where the capillary wall and the alveolus wall met. So the oxygen deficient cell that carries carbon dioxide west will transfer the carbon dioxide from the capillary carried by blood. It will be transported to the alveolus, the carbon dioxide, and then it will be released into the air, while the oxygen that we inhaled earlier that arrived in the alveolus will be diffused into the blood cell to form an oxygenated blood cell. So this is the process of gases exchange, where both of the gases are exchanged at the same time. And then for the oxygenated blood cell, it will be transported to the left side of the heart from the lungs, and then the heart will help pump the oxygenated blood to the all the other cells of the body. And then once the cells use the oxygen supplied, it will produce an oxygen deficient blood, and then the oxygen deficient blood will be transferred back into the heart, and then the heart will pump the oxygen deficient blood back into the lungs for them to pick up the oxygen and to release carbon dioxide. That's basically just gases exchange occurring all over again. So that's why respiration involves these two processes, which is the gases exchange and the gas transport. So moving on, the second topic is the differences in the respiratory system in terms of gases exchange in different types of animals. So the animals involved here are the insect, fish, amphibian, reptile, and mammals. So as they all differ in terms of their physical characteristic and their habitat, so they all also differ in terms of their respiratory system. So all the 5 animals, they uses different organs or different parts of their body in order to perform gas exchange. For the insect, they use trachea. For the fish, they use gills. For the amphibians, they use skin and lungs because amphibian can survive both in land and water. For the reptile and mammals, they use lungs, but lungs that they use differ because reptile uses rib cage, and then mammals use a diaphragm. So in order to have a maximum gas exchange, they have to maximize the surface area. So all the 5 types of animals have different ways to maximize the surface area. For the insects, they do not have to maximize the surface area because the tracheals, which can be found in the trachea, they reach to every cell of the body because the tracheal extend to every area of their body. For the fish, they possess a long and thin filaments and lamellae for maximum gas diffusion. For the amphibians, they possess a gas permeable skin that have capillaries underneath their skin. For the reptiles and mammals, they possess alveoli, which is the small sac structure that are wrapped with a great amount of capillaries. So in order to increase the efficiency of the gases exchange, they have to keep the surface of the gases exchange moist. The insect, they possess water at the ends of their tracheals, and they also have an internal gas exchange system. And then they also possess hair around their spiracles to trap humid air. So spiracles is the tiny opening that can be found on their body where the air will goes in and out. For the fish, they live in the water, so their gills will always be moist. For the amphibians, the skin, they often in moist condition because it have a glands that produce mucus, and they also have an internal gas exchange system. For the reptile and mammal, both of these animals have an internal gas exchange system, but for the mammals, they have mucus in their trachea, and they also possess nasal cavity that help warm and humidify air. Next, all these types of animals, they also get their source of oxygen differently. For the insect, reptile, and mammal, they get the source of oxygen from the air, while for the fish, they get their source of oxygen from the water as they live in the water. And from the amphibian, as they live both in the land and the water, they get their source of oxygen from the air and the water. And then they also practice different mechanisms during gases exchange. Mammal, reptile, amphibian, and insect, they all use tidal ventilation, meaning that the air that goes in and out are from the same source. While the fish, they uses unidirectional flow of water through their gills, and they also use counter-current exchange system, where the water that flows, it will flow in the opposite direction as the blood flow for a maximum gases exchange. And then last but not least, the only types of animals that have an extra storage area to store oxygen is the insect, because they possess an air sac that can store extra air. So all the fish and the amphibian, reptiles, and mammals, they do not possess any oxygen storage part on their body. So to be more clear, I'll be showing on the structures of the types of animals that I mentioned earlier. So for the insect, they use trachea. Basically, for respiration, they use tracheal system, which involves spherical, tracheal tube, and the tracheal. So this is the spherical, the tiny opening where the air that goes in and out. And then if we zoom in the area, this is spherical where the air goes in and out, and then it will travel through the air that are rich in oxygen will travel through the tracheal tube and then arrive at the tracheal that are bind to the muscle. So that's how the oxygen can be diffused to every cells of the body, because as you can see, the tracheal system extend on the body structure. And then for the carbon dioxide waste, it will be transferred in the same pathway but in reverse motion. So the carbon dioxide will transfer, it will be released through the environment from the tracheal to the tracheal tube and then out from the body through spherical. Moving on to the fish, because fish live in the water, so it gains the oxygen from the water, and then when they swim, the water will goes in to their body, will go through their gills. So their gills have a long and thin like structure here called filaments, and then in the filaments they have a lamellae. So lamellae is this structure, and then as they uses counter current exchange, the water will flow in the opposite direction to the blood flow. So as you can see here, when the water flow over the lamellae, the oxygen saturation decreases from 100% to 15% because the oxygen are absorbed by the red blood cell, while in the blood flow, the oxygen saturation increases from 5% to 90%. So it will change oxygen poor blood into an oxygen-rich blood. And then for the carbon dioxide waste, we will go through the same pathway where we will have to go through the gills and then out into the water. For the amphibians, because they can live both in the land and the water, they have lungs and skin. And then for the lungs, they will pump air into the lungs by opening and closing their nostril. That can also help to control the air volume and pressure that goes in and out. And then if they are in the water, they will use the skin, because the skin have a gas permeable skin, so oxygen can easily diffuse into the skin that have capillaries underneath it. So if the oxygen are diffused, it can transport it directly into the capillaries, where the blood flow will help to transport the oxygen to the other cells of the body. But then the tadpoles, which is the younger growth stage of the frog, they use gills, because tadpoles cannot live in the land, so they have to use gills to perform respiration. For the reptile, they uses lung. So basically, the reptile will contract their rib cage here. They will contract the rib cage here to lower the pressure, and then it will draw the air in along with the oxygen. And then if the rib cage are back to its resting position, the pressure will increases, and then it will force the air out of the body along with the carbon dioxide. Lastly, for the mammals, it has lungs. So when the oxygen are inhaled, it will arrive at the alveolus that are wrapped with capillaries. So the carbon dioxide from the blood will be transferred to the alveolus and then will be released into the air, while the inhaled oxygen will be transported to the blood cell and then create an oxygenated blood cell. That's all from me. Thank you.